X-Men. You were the X-Men.
Wolverine. What's up, guys? Welcome back to House of Power. This is movie number 6, I believe. My name is Kyle, guys. We got our Wolverine hat fitting. We got our X-Men shirt here, guys. We're going through every live-action X-Men movie. My first time through these movies, except for Logan. I've seen that one. And the 2 Deadpool movies leading up to Deadpool and Wolverine or Deadpool 3. Super excited, guys. What I'm going to do is go through my thoughts on the movie, I should say, my favorite character, a score to 10, and then we're going to rank this movie against the other 5 movies of the previous 5. So appreciate you guys. Go check out the other content. But guys, let's go. Again, runtime with these movies are so important, right? And I think at the core, this is a really cool story. Hugh Jackman, it is Hugh Jackman. Again, he's so fit. He looks so good. He's so cut in this movie. And it's like, oh man, he really felt like Wolverine in this movie. And it's called The Wolverine. But considering we had an X-Men Origins Wolverine solo movie, it felt weird to also do a solo Wolverine movie. And this one is kind of in like a weird space where it's like after the events of Last Stand, where a lot of the movie focuses on Jean Grey and he keeps seeing Jean in like lingerie in bed, and it's really weird. And the woman keeps asking like, "Who's Jean? Who's Jean?" And he's like, "I don't want to talk about it, dude." But he loves Jean. It just felt weird that she's kind of lingering, and he's like kind of down on his luck at the beginning, and he's reminds me a lot of the final season of Samurai Jack, where he's like all rugged and out of shape, and he's going through pain and everything. But then he obviously gets cut and he looks a lot more like the traditional Wolverine. But there's a lot of talk about the antemedum. Is that what it's called? I just had it in my head, guys. I forget. Whatever the stuff is called, it's inside Wolverine and his claws are made out of. We get a cool scene at the end with that. But this movie just too long, man. And it's like if this was 90 minutes, this is, I think, a little over 2 hours. Disney Plus telling me 2 hours and 7 minutes on the screen that I'm looking at. I just wish this was 30 minutes shorter. It was just a little too fluffy. And I liked parts of this movie a lot. Some parts I didn't care about, but I love how there's a new setting. I love Wolverine going to Japan. I did miss the rest of the X-Men cast here. I felt like, oh, Wolverine is cool, but we're missing those dynamics between whether he's talking to Jean or whether he's talking to Rogue or whether he's, trying to fight Scat, whatever he's trying to do. It's just like Wolverine is super cool, but I feel like there's only so much you can do with that character. Now, this movie opens up at Nagasaki when the atom bomb is dropping, and that's really well done and chilling and haunting. And these soldiers go out there and 3 of them kill themselves. They stab themselves in the chest, and the alarms are going off, dude. And Wolverine's like, "You're not gonna be able to run, boys." He's like, "It's a B-29." And it's really haunting. And then there's one guy, for whatever reason, I think he can't kill himself, but then Wolverine runs out and gets him at the last second, and they're running back to the thing. And Wolverine is in, I thought like a tank, but it looks like a bunker, or maybe like a mobile bunker. I don't know. That was confusing, but he gets down, but we get this amazing shot where he puts like a shield or the cover on top of this guy at the bottom of like what looks like a well, and all radiation and the atomic bomb comes down, and he looks up and Wolverine is just completely like destroyed, but just enough where he's standing there, and the effects are so gross. It looks crazy, and it's terrifying and beautiful and haunting. And then he just slowly regenerates, and he's like, "Oh my God." And the guy's scared, and he's like, "No, no, it's okay. It's okay." And that ends up being, tries to give him the sword, and he's like, "No, I can't take it." But that ends up being the guy who then invites him back to Japan later, and he's like, "Okay." And this chick picks him up, and she's like, "We're going to Japan." He's like, "I'm not going to Japan." And then he just ends up going. And I like seeing him in a different light. Japan is always aesthetically super pleasing, and it's interesting to see like the culture. And she's like, "Get in the bath," and it's like, okay, dude. And it's like this scene is just designed for him to be like, "Oh, look how cut Hugh Jackman is," and he looked great. He looked amazing. His abs, his pecs, dude, looked great. He looked amazing. Oh, this is the scene where Hugh Jackman wants to show his body off a little bit. You know what I mean? Like he's in the bath, and it's like we don't need these Japanese women scrubbing him, scrubbing a naked Wolverine, but we got it, And am I mad about it? Not really. This movie just like it spent a lot of time trying to build this connection. I liked when they go to like the Love Hotel, and he's like, no, we want 2 separate rooms," and she's like, "We can't have 2 separate rooms." And they're like, "Do you want Mission on Mars?" And he's like, "Okay." And then it's like lift off, and I was like, okay, this is cool. And the neon colors and stuff were really cool and different. and I like how they were in like kind of a slums part of town. And there's parts I really like. Like I said, guys, I'm probably repeating myself, but and then there's just a lot of stuff that I didn't really care about, and I feel like they were walking around for too much time. And then at the end, he goes after this giant. Is it out? Oh, I just they said it the whole movie, and I had it in my head, and I was like, I'm gonna get it. Hold on, guys, I'm gonna look it up because I want to know what is inside Wolverine. Oh, adamantium. Adamantium is what it's called, which is such a cool, like, what an awesome name for a thing. It's almost, it reminds me of like vibranium, and vibranium is cool, but adamantium is so cool. And that kind of has this regenerating powers. But what's cool about this movie is that he gets hit with this lady who's like basically poison ivy, but she's like a serpent. She spits some stuff on him, I think, and one of the guys like goes up and she spits on him, and his face like disintegrates him. Like kind of reminded me of Nagasaki a little bit. And I was like, oh, interesting. But this woman has powers, I guess, where later she says she's immune to every poison known to man, and but she spits out the poison. But it has like these little leeches, or these, I don't know if it was like a machine or like a metal leech or whatever, but it gets inside. And Wolverine halfway through the movie like realizes that he's not regenerating. And I'm like, oh, this is really cool, because the whole thing with Wolverine is that like he can just be like ruthless in battle, and even if he takes like bullets or whatever, he's gonna regenerate. I mean, that's how he killed Jean, because he could regenerate so quickly. But he's like, oh, I'm not healing like I used to. And then we later see that he's got this little leech on his heart. That scene that's pretty ridiculous. And he's spending the whole time with this woman. And I'm like, they're clearly going to make out or sleep with each other at some point. But then there's another woman with red hair that is like a psychic, or she can like see in the future, and she keeps telling him like, I saw your death and I saw my parents die. And I'm like, that's cool. But I was like, there's too many characters in this movie, and there's not that many characters. But I'm like, you have this woman, and then this lady just kind of pops in at the end, and she's like, Wolverine, you can't go, I saw your death. And I'm like, who is this lady again? I don't remember you ever coming into the picture. But he is on the operating table and he cuts himself, and he's like, oh, I can't see. And I'm like, okay, dude, like, we could have, because this one guy comes in at the second, and she's like fighting over, and Wolverine's like, bro, I'm trying to like take the thing off of my own heart. And it's just weird, because I'm like, I know you did it for like dramatic effect, but I'm like, this guy happened to stumble in the second that Wolverine is like doing an operation on himself. And I don't know, that was all like interesting, and the sound he's making stuff and the visuals were gross. But he gets up there, and then he eventually fights a giant aluminium samurai outfit, which I was like, oh, okay, guys, like this is a little over the top. And then later he cuts the head off, and we think it's good, but then we find out it's that guy he saved. But now he wants Wolverine's regenerative powers, and so he became so obsessed with adamantium that the guy was like, one of the guys is like, hey, he put the company basically bankrupt because he's been so obsessed with this metal, and he's been trying to get this regenerative powers. He wants like immortal life. And so he gets Wolverine, and there's a gross scene where he cuts. Apparently, he heats up the adamantium sword or something, or just a sword. He found something to cut through adamantium, and he cuts off his claws. And then the grossest part is that he's like, Wolverine's like dangling, and then he takes like three little drills and puts them into his claws and like pulls them up. And I was like, oh, dude, it was gross the way they did it. And he's like, eternal life. He cut the head off, but then he was like in the chest part, and he's like, the only way I've been alive is through this machine. And I was like, okay, this is kind of weird. But Wolverine's like, oh, actually, dude, you know what? I got these bone claws because guess what? I didn't have my powers just because of the adamantium. If you remember from X-Men Origins, Wolverine, the adamantium just made him get better claws, basically, but he still had the natural claws. And so he's basically got a backup pair, and he's like, actually, dude, boom, watch this. And he takes him out, and then he's like, you invited me here to say goodbye. He's like, sayonara, and throws him over. And I was like, oh, okay, all right, you got me, dude. It was pretty cool. Some of the fight scenes were really cool. Wolverine being in Japan was cool. The culture change was cool. A lot of this movie I liked. I enjoyed it, a good amount of it. I just felt like it was too long, but the ending was good. And then we get the post-credit scene, guys, which had me all fired up, because he's going through the airport and suddenly everything starts shaking, and I was like, dude, I know that's Magneto coming. And I was like, which Magneto is it going to be? Because remember, this is after First Class, so I'm like, is it going to be Michael Fassbender's Magneto, or is it going to be the GOAT, Ian McKellen? And you hear Ian McKellen's voice, I'm like, oh, let's go, dude. And he turns around, and I will say Ian McKellen still looks good, but he hasn't aged particularly well. Patrick Stewart shows up too, and he looks exactly the same, and he looks great again. I don't know if it's the bald hair, if he just aged better, but Ian McKellen is probably older. But I was like, oh, his face is a little droopy. He still looks really cool. His voice is still awesome, but I was like, oh, you're looking a little old there. But for him to show up, excuse me, for him to show up and for Patrick Stewart to show up, I was hyped, dude. And I was like, let's go, dude. So that's how the movie ends. I don't know where it's gonna go, but again, as someone who hasn't seen these movies before, I'm hyped for to see like where are we going next, because it's weird. They just did like First Class, which you think is like the new X-Men, but then you still got Wolverine, and now you're bringing the OG cast back, and it's like watching these movies back to back to back to back. It's just like, oh, years and years have gone by, but for me, it's like I feel like okay, we got the OG cast and the new cast, and then they're like, here's the OG cast again. And I guess this was the 2013 movie, and the original X Men came out in 2000. So it has been 13 years between when we first saw Patrick Stewart and Ian McKellen. But just to see it, even though it's only been a couple movies, just to see him come out, I was like, this is hype, dude. So it felt like an MCU moment, like a big MCU reveal, and so I was excited about that, and I think it really put like a nice little cherry on top of this movie. All right, guys, my favorite character for this one, dude. It's in the title. It's the Wolverine. There's an awesome scene I didn't even mention where the guy he's fighting this guy like at night, and he keeps stabbing him. And that's right after he gets his regenerative powers back, and then he stabs him right in the chest. And then he's like, "What kind of monster are you?" And he says, "The Wolverine." And I was hoping he would say, "I'm the Wolverine," and it's a little thing, but it was still badass. It was still awesome. He just takes the sword out. But Logan, Wolverine, Hugh Jackman, he's great, dude. He's so good. He this is the first time I was like, this he's iconic as this character. And he's obviously younger in the first X-Men movies, and X-Men Origins Wolverine I just felt like just wasn't a very good movie. This one I felt like, oh, this is sick. This was almost like a soft reboot of the character where it was kind of like he's going off on his own, but then I was kind of wondering why he was helping these people. It felt kind of weird. Some of the plot points didn't exactly add up, but I thought his performance and Hugh Jackman was so good. And again, he was so cut. And it's like, that's what you want Wolverine to be, like a beast, like literally. Not Kelsey Grammer's beast, but like his own beast. And I just love how he kind of goes on this journey of like, not really self-reflection, but he has to face this adversity and healing, and even the emotional parts of him, like being at Nagasaki is crazy. And especially because we know he fought in the wars and stuff before. So crazy, crazy stuff. And obviously like being basically immortal can, I feel like, mess with you. So he gets this human side of him when he can't regenerate it. It's like gives him a new perspective. And so it's kind of weird that he gets his powers back. I wish that they kind of messed with that, him not being able to regenerate longer, but he was so good. And you know, he's the star of the show for good reason. And I think he was easily my favorite character in this one. All right, guys, that brings us to the score. This one I'm going to give a 7-1. I enjoyed this movie, you know, and I had it at a lower score, honestly, because of the fluff and because of some of the parts I wasn't vibing with. But that end sequence is really cool. Him basically being like, "Nah, dude, I got natural claws for you." It's a little thing, but like that fight ended up cool. And then just reflecting on the movie, and then the end sequence, dude, I was like, oh, and I was like, all right, this was a good movie. Again, a little too long for my liking. Cut off 20-25 minutes, get like a super cut of that, and I'm all about that. But it was awesome, and I really enjoyed my time. And it wasn't like X-Men Origins Wolverine where I was like, this movie sucks, and it's just exploding car after exploding car. This was like, okay, there's an actual story here, and there are moments, and there are character moments. And the Jean Grey stuff was weird, but I get why he was seeing it because he's still in love with her, and he had to kill the woman he loves. And it was a good time, dude. And I missed the rest of the X Men cast, but I think it was a pretty successful sort of side story. And I wouldn't be surprised if like they reached out and did other stories like this. But I think with Logan, with Wolverine, with Hugh Jackman, I think they did a good job, and I had a good time with this movie. All right, guys, that's going to bring us to the rankings. So if we pull up the rankings here, guys, number one, still reigning champion, of course, and I don't know if it's going to get touched. X-Men: The Last Stand at number one with a 9.4. We got the original X-Men number two and an 8.1. This is going to slot in number three, guys, and then the new number four is going to be X2 X-Men United at a 6.6. Number five is going to be X-Men First Class at a 6.2. And number six is going to be X-Men Origins Wolverine at a 5.2. So we have kind of a varying range of quality here. You know, obviously I thought first stand. Last Stand was, I think, above and beyond the best one so far. I think it's a super high quality movie. This is kind of somewhere in the middle where it's not a bad quality, but it's not the best movie we've ever seen. And so that's okay to kind of be in the middle, but we've had some really bad ones and we've had some really good ones. And so it's interesting to see like how this list kind of fills out as we keep going. And my first time watching all these movies, and I know, I said nothing's gonna touch it, but I forgot Logan is coming. So Logan will likely be number one. I'm not gonna go in there with any sort of preconceived notions. I'm going to go in there and just take it for what it is. But I remember it being excellent, and I know people love that movie, and I think I love that movie, and that's where we get the first R-rated Logan. And I missed the higher ratings or the deep mature ratings, which is why I'm excited for Deadpool Wolverine, because some of these scenes where Logan's cutting them up in Japan, there's no blood or anything, and I'm like, this would have been more satisfying if you saw it and there's a blood splatter, or you see it and then like this guy's leg comes off, and they had like an easy. I think this is a PG-13 movie, but they obviously like didn't lean into that gore as much. So it's gonna be super exciting, especially being a Deadpool movie, dude. It's probably gonna get crazy. We've seen the previews of that Wolverine and Deadpool fight where they're literally shooting each other and stabbing each other over and over, and like it's just gonna be wild. I think so. And just imagine what we're not seeing in the trailers. And there's been reports now that they like intentionally faked spoilers so that they wouldn't ruin the movie. Like Marvel's cooking now. Is Marvel back? I think Marvel's back, but I'm super excited to keep going, guys. But those are how our rankings shape up through 6 movies. All right, guys, that's another episode. House of Power, the Wolverine in the books, guys. Let me know what you guys thought of this movie. Do you agree? Disagree? Did you like? Did you dislike? I had a good time with this, and like I said, even though it's a little bit longer, looking back and talking about it, I sometimes I have a score in my head when I start this review, and then I start talking about it, and I go, "Oh, this was pretty cool," or "This was pretty good." Oh my God, hold on, I didn't even mention, guys. I can't believe I almost forgot this. The freaking train scene. The train scene. This was the Uncharted 2 moment. I can't believe I didn't mention this. The fight on top of the train when it first happened, I was like, this is dumb. This is corny. This is cheesy. It doesn't look amazing. And then it kept going, and I was like, oh, okay. Like Wolverine pushes his claws up to they gotta avoid the things, just like an Uncharted, the overhangs and stuff. That was sick. The fight on top of a bullet train going 300 miles per hour, and the guys are like sliding down, and then he uses the momentum. He jumps off and uses the momentum to go at him. Oh my God, that was so cool. I cannot believe I forgot about that scene until the very end of this review, but I'm glad I didn't forget it, guys. But on that note, we're going to end this review. Another episode, guys. House of Power. Appreciate you. And until next time, guys, I'm the Wolverine.